So, hey everyone, it's April 24th, 2016, and you're looking at episode 41 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and over there is Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
And Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Laurel Black.
Hi.
There we go. And our guest today teaches drum set at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. He is also the director of jazz bands and coordinator of small jazz ensembles there. Keith Brown is an active performer in the Knoxville Jazz Orchestra, among others. He is sponsored by Meinl Cymbals and Innovative Percussion and has performed with a very, very long list of famous musicians, including Wycliffe Gordon, James Moody, Stephon Harris, and At Percussion's very own Warren Wolf, who I was really excited to see Warren Wolf's name because we got to interview him. So just to name a few, that's who Keith Brown has performed with, and thanks so much for joining us. Hi, Keith.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, sure. So is the semester wrapping up for you? Do you have one more week, 2 more weeks, something like that?
One more week, then the study period with the tests and juries, and I know you know the drill, and then we're done.
Yeah, sure. What's the drill like there? How much do you do with the percussion studio juries? Are you in on those?
I used to be quite active with it. Was sort of more of a very formal jury. Our new percussion teacher, Andy Bliss, he has so many activities leading up to juries. He sort of have downgraded the final exam feel to the juries, so the students still perform if they haven't performed recently, and I often drop in and hear those, but it doesn't quite have the assembled panel of jurors that we used to do. But we do that with the jazz area, all the students, and I hear all the different saxophones and trombones and bass players, and my drummers play for the jazz juries as well.
So I was wondering, I figured we could just talk about juries a little bit since it's kind of going on in all of our lives right now. A couple things. I'll ask 2 questions at once. I'll let you handle it. One, what exactly do you have your jazz drummers do for their juries? I'm just curious as to how my experience in undergrad compares to that. And then 2, how do you, I guess in general, just how do you handle juries? Like, I've had some students get really nervous about them. Other students are maybe a little too casual about them. So how do you handle kind of student attitudes toward juries?
Okay, good question. My first attempt to get a jury is to make sure that the kind of information that they will get from the other jurors has some meaning. So if they go in there and they play something that's sort of a technical exercise or something that's pretty difficult that doesn't really relate to something that they know about, it doesn't really give good information. So I often have them come in and play along with a track that maybe they've incorporated some transcription and maybe even a transcribed solo of a pretty famous recording of Max Roach or Roy Haynes that the jurors, the other jazz faculty, they would recognize and sort of kind of weigh in. Occasionally I'll have students pair up with some of the other students and have a bass player come in, and they'll play time if we're working on metric modulation or working on different comping ideas. It's nice to have a live person there as opposed to a track.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a performed and prepared piece, but obviously I'd like to have the improvisational aspect still be a considered part. So I've found over the years that if they come in, and although I'll be honest with you, in the freshman year, a lot of times that's a lot to ask. So sometimes they will come in and they'll play something that they're working on, maybe take 4 or 5 different activities with syncopation where you read the line with this and you change that and you have all this and try and play that along with the track and do 4-bar phrases and try and make it sort of fit. But it is kind of awkward. I mean, I guess in the real world, since there's not formalized drum set pieces that really sort of kind of come in, everybody knows and kind of read, drum set music, as you well know, is kind of tricky to read anyway, and when you give it to a saxophone player, they look at the way the nomenclature is, and they get real confused.
Yeah.
So it's easier just to say, to the Greg Tardy or saxophonist or whoever, what do you think about the students' time feel? Did they stay in form? Does it seem dynamically appropriate to the track and those kinds of things? As far as the second question, it is tricky to try and make it be formal because the jazz faculty is fairly laid back. We know these kids. We work with them pretty one-on-one, but at the same time, it is part of the grade, and we still allow the jury to be a portion of their grade.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we follow the guidelines of it being 35%, and the lessons are 60, and something else is 5 or whatever. But we do have a formalized jury system. Gotcha. And it's not, just to tag one more thing on, there is a more formal jury we do where they come in and they do 3 levels of sight reading, and they have to also play 2 scales. So make the jazz drum set students need to be able to play all the same scales that the other jazz majors do, all the the modes and a lot of the jazz bebop scale and all the various minor scales and different things that they need to know for improv class.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I find it difficult because some students get just so worked up and nervous about any sort of performance, and so it's like I try to tell them, like, no one does well all semester then poorly on their jury, or vice versa. But then when you say it like that, it's like it makes it sound like you're saying, oh, this doesn't matter at all, which of course you want it to. You want it to be that sort of final performance. So yeah, it's been interesting trying to deal with that for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just tack on to Ben there. I think the ultimate goal is not, right now I'm just trying to calm you down for your jury, but one way or another, we want you performing well. And like you said, Ben, yeah, if you're nervous for your jury, it's probably because you're not ready. So yeah, the two should be related: the preparation and successful jury, and yeah, how you teach that. Yeah, it might be let them freak out and and fall flat.
What's frustrating for me, I'm sorry I butted in, but when you have a student who's been underwhelming all semester, and then they think that they can rise up and come in and knock it out in the jury, and then think that that's going to be enough. In fact, to me, it's the opposite. Somebody can do anything all semester, and then all of a sudden they show they can do it. The jury, it's worse.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say that.
I'm going to fail you because you played your jury too perfect.
Yeah, it's like don't have 90% of your improvement for the semester happen in the last week. That doesn't showcase your ability.
We've all seen that.
Yeah.
Hey,
I like
Keith,
to kind of have a jury panel too, like you were saying, Keith, because then it also makes it more of a public performance rather than something for a grade.
Yeah, yeah.
Think of it as like, okay, this is putting you in a performance situation, and it's such an experience to get through that, especially if something happens, and recovering from that and having that experience of performing, which should be happening in every lesson. But I try to make it different from the lesson in that way by bringing people in that they respect, that'll make them nervous. So it's less of, okay, I'm doing this for my grade. It's like actually a performance.
Casey and Megan, do you have someone not on the percussion faculty coming to juries?
I usually, at least for the 2 years I've been here, it's been Julia and I, so 2 percussionists, and then an outside member not from the university.
Ooh.
So someone from out of town, or yeah, that's what it's been in the past.
Gotcha.
We haven't here at JMU yet. It's just been the 3 percussion teachers, but I would love to do that. I was going to say at Concord, at Laurel and I's last gig, it was such a small program. We pretty much sat in on everyone's juries, and I was like almost the whole faculty was there, give or take 1 or 2 people sometimes. And there were a few semesters we would just split up because we would say, oh, let's get it done quicker this year. But yeah, we sat in on brass juries, vocal juries, piano juries. Laurel played for most of these anyway, so Laurel was going to be there anyway. But
Wow.
it was really good for me to make comments on other instrumentalists and vocalists juries, and then yeah, for my guys it was great because we'd go on stage, and band director would be there, theory teacher would be there, music history teacher was there, so. And of course, the program was just that size. We were able to do that. And one year we had a mock audition, curtain, rounds, prize, and everything. We're doing that this year, but not in place of juries. I'm just kind of doing it anyway. But I would like to do that in the future. I thought it was real successful.
We have the 2 percussion faculty here, and then the 2 band directors are in on the percussion juries. So it's a panel of 4 people. But it's like, it's almost funny. It's like any one of us could sit here and give the same comments, even the non-percussionist band directors, because it's like it's just good musicianship is all we're looking for. You know, like technique
Yeah.
is part of that, but you can't really have good musicianship without solid technique. So
Yeah. I would love to have here closer to what we had at Concord, just because it was so neat having the band director there and having these other people there. But man, here I would feel terrible asking. It's like, hey, would you mind coming to sit in on 20-minute percussion juries? Like,
Yeah.
it just, and they are all so busy. They have their own big studio full of people. Keith, you mentioned transcriptions, and it made me think of a jury I had once where I had a student of mine play a Dennis Rogers piece called Funky. I don't know if you know this drum set solo.
I know his pieces. I don't know. I know that one in particular.
It's a really cool piece, and he played the fire out of it, of course, and the whole panel really loved it. But what do you think of entire written out drum set solos, and do you use any of that in your pedagogy? And if you do, I'd love to hear some of your favorites.
Honestly, I have in the past on occasion when a student maybe has a technical issue that one of those solos might address, or if they are maybe needing some more reading challenges in that case. But I actually prefer that they take transcriptions, or either they make their own transcription or they find transcriptions that someone has done of a notable drum set player who's improvised it. And then we can take it and sort of talk about form, we can talk about phrases and how it relates to the melody. Actually, the only book that I use for transcription is the Charlie Parker Omni book, where it's just Charlie Parker's solos. It's the melodies and the solos to many of his recordings, and I have them learn to play the melody on the snare drum, and sometimes play in time while they're trying to play it, and then approximate the best they can the shapes of the solos. And it sort of does a couple of things at once. They learn the tunes, they get to know the language, and they also get to hear, trying to play along with Charlie Parker, you hear how elastic he could be, but also how he could really kill the time, and of course then you hear the rest of the band too. So I think it's a bit more valuable use of time than, say, a standalone drum set solo.
Sure.
Now, I've just about changed my mind a little bit on that, is that I've been hearing in some of the percussion juries and percussion recitals, some of these students are playing some pieces that are sort of multi-percussion based drum set pieces that maybe aren't traditional drum set, but some of the things that have been written out and some of the things that they're doing is quite intriguing. I'm thinking, well, maybe that's the way to go rather than trying to play an in-time groove solo, but maybe something that's more multi-percussion.
Yeah. Do you guys know the piece? There's a piece called Ragavan by one of the Nexus members, maybe Bill Kahn. No, I don't think it's Bill Kahn. But anyway, yeah, it's for sort of modified drum set, and it's a multi-percussion piece, but it falls on drum set basically.
Well, and I was thinking, of course, because you said transcriptions, but also because Andy is your colleague there, and I know he's real into modern music, and there's so many modern composers, like Mark Applebaum writes for drum set. Zach Browning, who we had on, writes for drum set in many of his pieces, and yeah, it does seem like something I see really contemporary percussionists doing a whole lot, and of course it's all written out real specific a lot of the time.
On that note, I really appreciate when a composer writes out for drum set and they're actually writing for drum set. And a lot of the time they'll even sort of put a note of like, you can modify this as long as it still falls in the same groove. Because one time I had to play a piece, and I won't name any composers' names, but this composer notated opening hi-hat.
Oh God!
As a sound. So you would go like,
oh man.
And it's like that. The whole point of the hi-hat mechanism is it's like a snare throw. Like it's not supposed to make sound. And so, yeah, I've argued with this composer of like, listen, if you're sitting 15 feet out in the audience in the middle of this chamber piece, you're not going to hear 4 beats after I click the hi-hat, it going like that. It doesn't make
if you have a really crummy hi-hat, you can hear it.
Maybe was there a visual that goes with it, Ben?
No, it was like one of those pointless things. Also, as an aside, on the same piece, I had chimes in my like multi-percussion setup, and I had to play a bull roar, which is that thing you spin above your head. If you think about it, that's 5 feet out in the air, and you're standing next to chimes. It doesn't work very
Well, you know, there is a recording of John Bonham. I think it's Moby Dick, where you can actually hear he's playing an old lugwood hi-hat, and the felt washer that's on top of the mechanism where the pedal would go up,
Yeah.
been worn down, and you actually can hear the ping of the upstroke of the hi-hat.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. And so maybe that guy thinks all hi-hats will get that sound, and he's trying to get that going on.
I don't know. He was a weird dude too.
Speaking of hi-hats, we have a question from Jeff Mulvihill, who is a friend of the podcast, a student of Keith Brown, and also works at Mapex Majestic. And man, these Armory series hardware, I just love the hi-hat. I don't think I've ever plugged any equipment on this show yet, but I just want to tell Jeff that I love the new Armory hi-hat. I think it's so cool, and thanks so much for helping us with that. Jeff Mulvihill asks.
That was a good connection there, Casey.
I know. Well, Megan, that's why I'm the host. That's why I get paid the big bucks. So Jeff Mulvihill asks, is there really any difference in how you listen and hear the big band from being at the drums to leading the band as the director from the front? I was asked to lead a clinic once and totally chickened out because I couldn't stand the idea of not drumming.
That's a great question, and thank you for that, Jeff. You know, I played big bands for many, many years, both as a student and as a professional. And when, I guess it's been 20 X amount of years ago, they asked if I would take over the big band when we had our professor retire, and I agreed to do it, reluctantly because I wasn't sure I was ready. But I did it, and by standing in front of the big band, I began to really start to understand really what it was that I was supposed to do. You know, all the things that I would ask my drummers to do, I was realizing that it was necessary not so much for the drumming part, but for the sake of the band, the energy of the chart, the stability of the horn players, the stability of the dynamics. I mean, so much comes out of that chair in terms of the energy relationship to how the eighth note is swung, you and the lead trumpet player, all these things we learn about. But to stand in front of the group and hear how that's not happening and try and figure out how to get a drummer to do it. Next thing you know, when I'm playing in a big band, it really changed my viewpoint. And I'm not saying that I'm the world's greatest big band drummer at all, but I'm saying compared to how I was before that, I was lost. I thought I had it together. No way. So I think it's great. If you get another chance to do it, then go for it.
Don't be a chicken, Jeff.
Yeah.
I don't know if
not one of those.
Laurel knows this about me, but I don't know. Megan and Ben, you probably don't know. I directed the jazz band at Concord for a year.
I did not know that.
I feel like you two were the only professors at Concord.
Did you enjoy it?
It was really fun. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And of course, you know, I've played jazz drum set, you know, my whole educational life, and so I feel like I was equipped and I was ready for it. But you know, sometimes a sax player would say, "Hey, I can't seem to get this note out. What's this? What do I do?" And I would go like, "I don't know. What do those buttons do?" Yeah, like I don't know. What are those little like things on it? Okay, anyway, here we go, and we, you know, continue on. And I just admitted what I didn't know, and said, "Well, I don't know about that." And I'd be like, "All right, who's an E flat instrument? Oh, you are? Okay, here you go." You know, and it was really comfortable and fun. And at the time, the jazz band wasn't happening there. The band director at the time decided not to do it. And I did it once, and then everyone saw, okay, yeah, we can totally do this, and then she took it over and kept it going, and it stayed fine. And
that's cool.
Good for you. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing as most ensembles. It's of course it's about balance. It's about staying in flow, playing your part well, listening. You know, teaching them how to listen. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's just like stylistically, that's when it gets different. And if you play jazz drum set, then your ears know what to do, but like same thing. Saxophone player, how do I do this, or how do you do a housetop accent versus a regular accent on a saxophone. You learn that it's not that hard. I mean,
that's actually in my percussion methods class or percussion pedagogy class. The first day of class, I always ask them, "Who in here feels qualified to teach percussion?" And no one raises their hand. I say, "You all are, because you're all musicians.
Yeah.
It's not in any way different from singing or playing the trumpet or playing the clarinet. It's just good musicianship."
There you go.
Yeah. So I have had one saxophone lesson. And Megan, do you want to tell them about my one saxophone lesson?
Yeah, so when Casey came to University of Missouri last year, when he was our guest artist at the Midwest Clinic, one of my students, Shane Batchelor, was finishing his bachelor's in music education, and so part of his saxophone methods course was teaching someone, having a lesson with someone in class. And so I guess he was joking. Shane was playing in the quartet with Casey. So I guess maybe he jokingly asked Casey if he wanted to be a saxophone student, and Casey was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And he actually did it. He took Casey to class and gave him a saxophone lesson.
I had a euphonium lesson once like that, and my friend had to film it, and the poor guy, I couldn't stop laughing the whole time. It took us like 10 takes, I think, to get it.
Oh man, it was fun. I took it seriously, and I think the Megan's percussionists were just laughing all the way to the bank at the notion of the guest artist is standing in for what you would normally just grab any friend, student in the department who hasn't touched a saxophone yet. And yeah, Shane did a great job. I played a scale, and he taught me how to play a scale and Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Wow.
Right there, and it worked out. He passed, so yeah.
And so did you.
I know, and I passed. I passed the big test. I passed Megan's test.
So then he played White Knuckle Stroll on sax at Midwest.
Yeah.
Hey, so this question comes from Rodney, and he says, how would you suggest overcoming nervousness and blanking at solo ideas when playing with a jazz group, particularly if you're relatively new at Drumset?
That's a good question. Obviously, I think when you're playing in a jazz setting and you've been playing time behind, everybody else has someone else accompanying them, and all of a sudden, time for drum solo, and everybody stops, and you are, on your own, and that's pretty hard. One, you feel like you could fill up the space. There's always the traditional expectation of, well, a good drum solo is going to be really fast, isn't it? It's going to have a lot of really cool stuff, isn't it? And so then you get kind of caught up in what do I do and what should I do. So with that in mind, you sort of start your solo at a negative. So what I usually try and do with my students, one reason why I use the Charlie Parker Omnibook is that if you try and base your solo as a paraphrase of the melody, at least to start off with, and you have something to base it from, not only will you stay in form and you sort of have some melodic ideas based upon, but it takes away of you having to be the creator of all. You're basically just starting off with a paraphrase, and you can do that. You can take an idea, then from there, hopefully, it starts to get motivic ideas, and you can go from there. And then, of course, if you have some go-to, every improvising musician needs some go-to licks, or patterns, or ideas. Formulaic approaches where you take this scale, or you take this bebop lick, or you take a Crimea River lick, or whatever, they're going to be present in everybody's solo. So drummers need to have those too. And if you have a handful of those mixed in with the form of, or the melody of the tune, then you should feel like you've got enough together to where you shouldn't be too nervous. But a lot of it's just experience. Go ahead.
No, sorry, you go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt.
Well, I was going to say, and then the other thing of it being nervous is the last part of it. One thing I start with a lot of students is when we're going to be playing form solos is how do you set up to bring the band back in? So you actually start by learning to play the last 4 bars of a solo. How are you going to cliche, not the roll off, but of course that can be done too. But what part of the last part of the tune you're playing? Yeah, you can indicate to the band. Do you bring the tempo down? Do you do a certain rhythm? And get pretty good at ending your solo, so you're not worried about that part. because a lot of drum solos will just kind of blast through, and all of a sudden the band stutters and can't come back in on time, and then you get scared of soloing. So work on how you want to get out of it, and then start and kind of have that as a target market, or not target market, but as a target place in the piece to go to.
So I had a question actually, because we're talking a lot about how do I start, and younger students and all like that. And we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago with Michael D'Angelo. But Keith, I wanted your opinion on it. In your opinion, should all percussion students, including classical students, play drum set? And I'm assuming the answer to that is yes. And if that is the case, what should a classical student's goal be when learning how to play drum set? Because obviously they're probably not trying to go out and steal jazz gigs. So
right.
What's the point in so many words?
Well, this one gets in terms of a time issue. I know you all have curriculum and you have different things that each level needs to get to, and I think drum set does need to be incorporated. But what I hate to see is when drum set becomes, well, you need to know how to play a bossa nova, you need to know how to play a samba, you need to know how to play a funk groove, and then you try to pass off on those grooves. Not that they shouldn't be a little bit of that in play, but it should be, can you take a pattern and have some freedom with it?
Yeah.
Can you play along with the track? Do you have any improvisational, or at least any freedom within those patterns to where you can actually play it? So
yeah.
if you are to sit down and play, or if you're in a situation where you need to be the drummer and not just somebody who's just trying to passively play like in a lesson, but you really need to know how to play drums. You need to have some freedom.
Yeah.
So again, playing along with tracks a little bit. I try and help out with some of the method classes for the students and go in and talk about, you need to be able to maintain a right pattern. It needs to be fairly predictable. It doesn't have to be the same pattern over and over again like we're always taught. Not a bad way to teach, but can you maintain tempo with your right hand over your left hand, and also as you're comping, does that blend in? Do they go together? And of course, there are thousands and thousands of books that teach that, but really, if you just think about it in terms of percussion playing, things are not that hard. And maybe in the spirit
some of us would beg to differ with that. Some of us would differ about drum set is hard.
Well, it gets tricky because it becomes, well, it's like a lot of things. If you think it has to be this level, one thing I encounter with a lot of great students at UT, that they have had such little experience in drum set that they feel like they're starting over.
Yeah.
They just got through playing all these really incredibly hard like I have 4 grad students this semester that are taken from me, and all of them are incredible musicians that play percussion. They have all this stuff, and they come into drum set and they like, we're not sure what to do. So I'm spending more time with them about, okay, well, it's not that you have to do all these amazing things. Sometimes the most simple can be the most effective.
Yeah.
So just the idea of being able to be comfortable, to again, back to the idea of maintaining some sense of time feel, be it in a funk pattern or in some sort of like a Latin pattern or whatever, where you have the pattern and then you can branch away from it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's hard. There's a lot of coordination issues, as we all know.
Yeah, I just find so often that, like, I'll have a student playing, like, land on marimba, and I never realize that people don't know where they are on a measure, like, when they're playing marimba. And it's like, if you can identify what beat 2 feels like when you're playing a backbeat, like, if you can literally just keep track of where you are on the measure, it makes playing marimba so much easier, I think.
Yeah. I've been thinking about trying to I'm not sure where this is going to go, but to try and look at a lot of the modern literature, and both in terms of formality, pieces that have ostinati rhythms in the left hand, and then also have not necessarily improvised right hand, but in the manner of an improvisation kind of melodies, and take the left hand rhythms and write a book of ostinati patterns that you need to learn to play with either hand and be able to improvise with the other. I think it'd be a great coordination. It could be for all instruments. It's a matter of great coordination in terms of getting the hands to where they agree and not agree.
Yeah. So everybody listening, Keith was charged with the impossible task of teaching me how to play drum set. And yeah, I am still one of those kids. It feels so different than playing something that's pre-composed and super contemporary. I think now I would be a better student, more prepared because I'm more secure in many ways, but yeah, it was so hard. It was so scary, and all I was doing was like syncopation and making up a measure every 3 measures or something. It was the most terrifying thing.
I remember you did much better than you say.
Well, thank you. Still terrifying.
Yeah, but yet you can play the marimba solo or the vibe part of Odic Trio, which has like crazy, crazy rhythms that take plenty. It's interesting. We actually have a question from Pius Chang, and it's it is, how good a drummer is Joe Black, Laurel's dad?
Oh.
That's a great question. If Joe Black had decided to go the route that I went, he would have been as successful. We were both very fortunate. Joe Black and I and many, many other students in the Knoxville area. There was a teacher named Chet Hedgecock, who was a student of Rory Knapp. Come find out. So one of the founding members of NARD had a drum school in Chicago, and Chet Hedgecock had gone there. Anyway, he loved teaching kids, but myself, Joe Black, and a couple others, that we were constantly battling it out in different competitions, and in some ways maybe even battling out for the affection of Mr. Hedgecock. And I'd go into my lesson, and I'm sure we were working on a lot of the same things. And Mr. Hedgecock would say, well, Keith, you know, Joe is in here earlier today, and I mean, he's got this together. And then, you know, he's just totally getting me vibed out, and I would go home and practice, and I know for a fact that he would tell Joe that I had it together, and he'd tell me, Darryl, you're good. That's kind of how the teacher he was. But Joe, and he still plays, but Joe was a great drummer, you know, and a good competitor. I was on my toes knowing I had to keep it together.
It's cool. Yeah.
Cool. So how big was his fro?
Wow. What's that, Laurel?
What? No, I said how big was his fro? Was Dad's fro like?
He had some cool hair.
Yeah.
So a little cool connection there. Let's see. Well, let's move on. Laurel, what have you been reading this week?
Yeah, so I wanted to share one of my favorite books with you guys. It's a very short book. It's called Notes to Myself. It's by Hugh Prather. It was originally written in 1970, and the copy I own is the 20th anniversary edition. So this is 1990, but we're coming up on 50 years in 2020. It's interestingly the first book that Prather ever had published, and it was wildly successful after a few years and inspired many sequel-esque type works to come later. What's really cool about this book is that, well, it's titled Notes to Myself, and that's essentially what it is. So for 2 years, from 1968 to 1970, Prather just sort of kept a little diary to himself and wrote these notes. Some were kind of like proverbs, some were little stories about different things that were happening in his life, and then submitted this manuscript to a teeny tiny West Coast publisher. They accepted it. Within years, it was translated into 13 languages or more and is worldwide now. So it's a pretty cool piece, and he covers all kinds of topics. There's things about friendship, about other relationships. There's little notes about social pressures, about insecurities, about anxieties, and then about trying to find ourselves in the midst of all these things. So, for example, one of the notes reads, "Interests change. Friendship based on mutual interests is doomed. Real friendship is an unshakable faith in what was once truly seen, no matter how recently or long ago." So I love this book. It's not a self-help book, nor is it meant to be a spiritual book. It's not like, you know, made of little Zen Buddhist poems or anything like that. It's just incredible honesty from Hugh that he happened to share, and obviously a lot of people like it because it's sold millions and millions of copies around the world. But what I would like to do is share currently 5 of his notes that resonated with me when I first found this book and when I reread it just a few days ago, because you can sit down and read this whole thing in just over an hour, and I'm a slow reader, so it's quite short, but 5 notes that still resonate with me in a way that affects my day. I read this at like 6:30 in the morning, and then my entire day I was just like, this is awesome. The day is great. I have things I have to do. I'm going to do them. But I had this different perspective, and it's just because of the way these are written. So I'm just going to read 5 of these. The first one is about insecurity, and it's lovely. He writes, insecurity can mean lack of self-knowledge. I am not secure with myself. I can't rely on myself. I don't know how I operate. I'm insecure to the degree I keep parts of myself hidden from myself. Or insecurity can mean I know how I operate, but I don't think it's good enough. When I find myself mentally rehearsing how I should act or how I should present myself, this shows that I lack respect for the way I am. I can't be trusted to be perfect, and so I have to make rules. Otherwise, I might just slip and be a human being.
Wow.
That's one of my favorites. Another, it's not that we fear the place of darkness, but that we don't think we are worth the effort to find the place of light. And this third one really, Casey and I were talking about it earlier, really resonates in terms of like trying to find your own path in terms of being a career or what you want to do. Hugh writes, there's part of me that wants to write, a part that wants to theorize, a part that wants to sculpt, a part that wants to teach. To force myself into a single role, to decide to be just one thing in life would kill off large parts of me. My career will grow from behind me. All I can do is let this day come to me in peace. All I can do is take the step before me now and not fear repeating an effort or making a new one.
Yep.
It's pretty good, right? That kind of connects with what Mike Burt was talking about this morning.
So you have to tell them the story of how you found the book, but first, I have to say I did see this book lying around the house somewhere, and I read a couple of pages, and I did find it really intriguing. And for anyone who's wondering, maybe, you know, how does it read? It reminded me a lot of the tone of a Kurt Vonnegut book called, I think it's A Man Without a Country. That is his kind of, it's not a novel, it's just kind of him thinking out loud. And it really had that same kind of tone. It's like, this is kind of biographical, but it's not a biography. It's just like their thoughts on paper, and it's really interesting, and I like hearing what they're talking about. But yeah, so.
Yeah, it's a really, I think it's just so lovely, because even in, you know, 4 sentences, you can tell that there's like 17 hours of thinking about it before these came out. And there's something about that that's like, dude, I do that. Everybody does that, and it's really cool that they're just on paper to discover. Casey, I guess I'll go ahead and tell everybody how I found this book. So, I came across this book during when I was living in Massachusetts, and I was in Salem visiting the Derby Square bookstore, which anybody near there, just go, because it is one of those, like, imagine a kind of weird used bookstore where you can't really see because there's so many books. That's what this place was. Like, who knows how dirty that carpet was? Every bookcase was like, and just filled with books, and books on the floor, books on top of bookcases. Like, some you couldn't even reach the top of the stacks, and many of them you weren't even going to try to get a book because then you were going to be that guy that just knocked over 38,000 books. And, you know, it's so anyway, my friends and I all went to Salem one day because it was fall and it was beautiful, and, you know, that whole thing. And we'd gone through the store, and I remember just tiptoeing through, and, you know, because you carry a bag, but you don't want to really carry a bag because then you're going to turn and, like, knock everything over. which is really embarrassing. And so I remember I had like 4 books that I was going to buy, and I was tiptoeing up to the cash register, which was really just a desk that had stacks of books all over it and about a 7-inch opening where you just slipped your books in. And then this guy took them, and he had like a foot-long beard and nails that were about 4 inches long, and he would just take the books and then be like $8, and you were like, oh my God, where am I right now?
That's a wizard, Laurel. You mean
Sure.
a wizard?
Yes, no. Yeah, well, it was Salem, so
Yeah.
anyway, and then he would give you back your money. So it was just an experience, this whole thing. But anyway, I was walking up to that little cash register place, and I turned to say something to my friend Jeremy, and my bag knocked a book off a stack. I know, it could have been terrible. But it was only one book, and it was this book.
Oh, wow.
But that's not even the coolest part of the story. So it fell, like, kind of open, like this, you know, on the floor. And so I just picked it up and looked at it, because then I saw it, and I thought, oh, maybe this would be interesting to me. And I'll see if I can get the camera to focus. This is the page it opened up on.
Wow.
Yeah. So for anybody who's not watching the video, it's a note that has my name in it. And it is literally the only page in the entire book where my name is printed.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I just bought it immediately.
It was that wizard that did that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why you guys are so surprised. He's a wizard. Salem. What? Yeah, of course. He's trying to sell a book.
The book is lit. You gotta burn it.
Yeah, he really knew what he was doing. But anyway, yeah, I think it cost me like $3, but I would have spent like $35, you know, because it just felt like the universe is talking to me right now, and I gotta listen. I gotta buy this. I gotta read it. I gotta figure out what's going on.
It's amazing.
It's so cool. It's like the most exciting thing that's ever gonna happen to me. Probably. I don't know. Do you want to hear? Do you want to hear the last 2 notes that I like, or we can move on?
Let's hear.
Okay. So I'll save the one with my name in it for last. Here's the 4th one that I like. I'm convinced that this anxiety running through my life is the tension between what I should be and what I am. My anxiety doesn't come from thinking about the future, but from wanting to control it. It seems to begin whenever I smuggle into my mind an expectation about how others or I should be. It is the tension between my desire to control the world and the recognition that I can't. I will be what I will be. Where is the anxiety in that? Anxiety is the recognition that I might not reach the run of the opinion ladder I have just set for myself. I fear death most when I'm about to exceed what I believe others think of me. Then death threatens to cut me off from myself because myself is not yet. And the last one. The last one. My friendship with Laurel seems to typify a dynamic that many of my newly forming friendships go through. At first, we saw only each other's virtues. Now we are seeing only each other's faults. If we make it through this latter stage, maybe we will see each other and truly be friends.
Wow.
Isn't that lovely?
That's really nice.
It's so nice. It's such a great book. So everybody, it's called Notes to Myself.
Notes to Myself.
It's great.
It is still being published. You probably said that.
Yeah, as far as I know. It'll hit 50 years in 2020, so my guess is even if it hasn't gone through a new printing, it will.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and it says it's sold over 5 million copies and has been translated into 10 languages, so I would say it's still being published.
It's really neat to me that, you know, of course I'm not surprised that, you know, the Kurt Vonnegut book, where he's kind of just thinking out loud, sells a lot. Everyone already knew who he was and wants to know what he thinks and what his opinions are because they're inspired by his other writing. But Prather is that you said this was the second thing he had ever put out there? The first thing, yeah. Yeah, so it's cool that it got to that acclaim. You know, speaking of books, I would like to ask, because we talked to Tim Jones about his history of rock and roll book that he uses at UNLV, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've heard Laurel rave about your history of jazz class at UT.
Actually, I teach two versions of it, one for majors and one for non-majors. I can't remember which one she took. Maybe one for non-majors.
Maybe. I actually took a different class, Casey. But yeah, people rave about his jazz class too.
Okay.
Yeah.
You took the music of Western culture, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the intro class.
Yeah.
Instead of
But it was
jazz,
very
yeah, well,
good.
that sounds really lame.
It wasn't my choice.
Oh.
You can pick it up with the registrar. I don't know.
I will. I'm gonna
Yeah.
call him right now, Laurel. Hey,
Yeah,
sit
please
tight.
do. Yeah. No, all during school, Keith was one of those, I'll tell you this, yeah. One of those teachers that everybody was just looked up to so much. And even since graduating, a lot of people, some who have gone on to master's programs, some who have not, just about everyone that came in contact with you, Keith, just talks about what a caring mentor you were, and that often, perhaps with other faculty members, they felt a certain way, or maybe that they weren't given as fair a shot as they could have been, but that you had the ability to kind of just see everyone for who they were, and the students recognized that. They would also talk about, I think this was Jonathan Leichman, if you remember him.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that, you always had to walk by the practice rooms to get to different parts of the building, and that someone was leaving, or you heard them say something like, "Oh, I just can't practice, I have to go home." And you just said, "Oh, okay, so you don't love music." and the fans and walked back.
No, thank you for saying that. It's very kind. It's a great opportunity, I think, to teach music, to be yourself, and to experience time with students. It's a wonderful thing to deal with it. It's hard sometimes. We have expectations as teachers, and students have expectations from their teachers, and you got to make sure those two things meet. But I think if you care about music first and foremost, and love that, and if you love people, the rest is pretty easy. So, but it's just fun. I always enjoyed teaching those classes, although they can be challenging. And teaching you privately and teaching private students, in a lot of ways, I don't mean to get philosophical, but I always try to teach those classes as if I'm teaching a lesson. And it's hard to do when you got 25 or 50 people to approach it from a one-on-one setting. But to me, the music is so personal and informal. If you try to formalize it, talk about it in too formal terms, you lose what I love about it. So I fail sometimes in catching everybody that way, but I try. But I think I'm saying that.
I like that so much better, though. Nobody's ever worded it that way. Yeah. If you make it too formal, it's blah.
Well, I mean, nobody falls in love with a friend or a loved one or with whatever because they are impressed with their formality. You might be respectful of that, and you might be in awe of someone's ability to be in check at all times. But you usually fall in love with people because of kind of who they are, and music presents itself that way to me. Most music, I think we all love, is you interface it with a sense of awe that catches you in a special moment, or sometimes not, and catches you later, and you sort of get caught up in it. And so to go into a class and you sort of talk about, Mozart piece or Beethoven as if it was important because it achieved certain things, sort of kind of takes away the heart of it. But you got to do a little bit of that too. I mean, you can't just say Beethoven was a cool cat and he did lots of stuff and he had some trouble with his parents and he was moody and broody all his life. I mean, you can make those funny stories, but a lot of it is just listen to it and it'll sell itself. I always say that I used to hate, back when I first started teaching music appreciation, I used to hate, it was called music appreciation because it's like, okay, who in this room doesn't like music? And I've never had anybody raise their hand and say, I don't like music. They might say, I don't like opera, or I don't like rap, or something. But so I think we do a disservice to think that those classes are going to change music for the good. Music doesn't need classes like that. You know, just my opinion.
So what do you do with a student? You assign them certain piece to learn, certain solo to transcribe, something, and they come back and they go, I didn't do it. I just don't like this. I just can't get into this, and they don't want to. And maybe you then go like, well, okay, you know what? This will do the same thing. Why don't you try this? I just don't like this.
Can I
what do you do with that
interrupt real
student?
quick with a quick little one-liner here? I recently finished reading The Joy of Music by Leonard Bernstein, and in this book he talks about modern music, and he says, what makes it modern, and why do so many of you hate what it is that makes it modern? Let's find out. Maybe after you know what it is that you may hate it less, or at least hate it more intelligently, or conceivably you may grow to like it, or you can go on hating it as before, which is your democratic right. But I love that, like, you can hate it or hate it more intelligently. You know?
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, that happens a lot. You know, more and more as the expected norm, say like in a Western culture class, it used to be there was a lot of points of reference. You know, you would hear orchestral music in movies. You would hear possibly grandparents listen to classical music. And you had a bit of exposure to it, and you could kind of relate. And that's become such a rarity anymore. But you've got to, again, maybe try and bridge that gulf by just trying to play music and trying to show how it relates. You know, try and think of some examples, but try and find like the last couple of semesters, I took a Justin Timberlake song. What is it called? Suit and Tie, Coat and Tie. Was it that pop song?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Suit and Tie, and so I start the class the very first day playing that piece. And I play about a minute or two of it and ask who in the classroom knows it. They sort of kind of smirk. Some people smirk because it's Justin Timberlake. Some people really like it. Then I back it up and then I diagram it on the board in terms of that there's a particular rhythm that unifies the piece. The form of it's an A, B, C type tune where there's a D in the middle and all that kind of stuff. And then after I play that, they go, oh wow, it's got some structure. And then boom, you go right in. You start playing like the third movement of Mozart's 39th Symphony, 47, whatever, and you show structure. Or you take a jazz piece, A, B, A. And for the first time in a lot of them, they actually think there is something here that could be learned. And so you try and disarm that opinion, I don't like it, Like, what is it, the worst naive statement, I don't know what it is, but I know what I like. You hear people say that about art all the time.
Yeah.
And I'll counter that with, you might think that, but you can't know what you might like with a little bit of work.
I guess I just try to tell them, whether you like it or not, just set that aside for a moment. And I guess you're saying that, Keith, by saying, well, look, there's something under here to learn that you can identify and that you can even like graph out on the board, like the form or the sequence of phrasing or whatever. And it's great because, like you said, it just like sets aside, like, okay, whether you like it or not, just put that over here. There's more to talk about whether we like it or not. We can. That's kind of, I would do a similar thing. I do it with Charlie Mingus Moanin'.
Oh.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite tunes. Opens with this big Barry sax solo, and there's this great live recording that I'm really a fan of. And I'd also do it with a pop song by Micah, who's this British pop star, sings in falsetto. But I would just talking about structure and how every two-bar phrase turns into 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. And I would keep a beat here, and then I'd keep measure count here. And do that a little while, and then I would assign them, like, okay, you're gonna keep track of every measure. You're gonna keep track of every 4 measures, and then we'd listen to the pieces, and yeah, of course, it would be like clockwork: 4, 16, 32, 64, or something. And yeah, it was really this like eye-opening moment for them, because not only would it work once, but it would work with multiple tunes. And I did even, I kind of stopped doing this, not because I had a bad experience with it or anything, but I was just kind of thought it was a little risky. But I would even tell them to like pick one of their favorite songs, and I'd plug it in and demonstrate the same thing, or at least demonstrate something very, very similar could happen. Okay, Ben, calm down. What do you need?
I was just going to say, you were talking about like sort of like, game-changing moments as to how you think about music. And when we had Zach Browning here just a few weeks ago, I had one of those.
Yeah.
Zach put on a recording of Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight. And as the song went along, he, said, okay, here's chorus, verse, and then afterward he said, who in here could do like a Roman numeral analysis of this song? And like, it was music at noon with all the music majors. Everyone raises their hand. He's like, there are 3 chords in the song. It's like D, C, B flat, and then it goes back up to C, then back up to D. And he's like, so you can analyze the piece of music that way, but did you really analyze it? What does that tell you about it? You're just saying there are 4 chords in this, or 3 chords in this piece of music. That's not the song. That doesn't tell you anything about the song. It's just, these are the chords of the song. So then what he does is he puts up like a timeline of the song, and if you know the song In the Air Tonight, you know the big drum fill that comes in? That...
What? No, I don't know.
And so he puts up this timeline, and it shows, the whole piece is a crescendo up to that point, and then coming away from there is a decrescendo. And he talks about, he's like, I'm like Pavlov's dog, like salivating, waiting for that thing to come in. And then he shows us that that occurs exactly at the golden ratio in the song. Like that occurs right there at the, whatever the golden ratio is. I don't know the number off the top of my head. But he's like, that tells you so much more about the song than knowing chorus, verse, or what the chords are. Like that right there, knowing it's a giant crescendo that goes up to this one point that's just an explosion, and then it all fades away from there, is really like the definition of the song so much more than it starts on a D chord,
Wow. Hey, I have a little quiz here. Who can guess what piece I played recently? Do 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 do. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. So tell me what you want. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
What?
Recent guess.
Looks like aphasia.
It looks like Applebaum, but you're singing Spice Girls, so I'm really confused.
Gone Dog Gone.
Oh. I didn't. What does that have to do with the Spice Girls?
So because every 2 bars of that piece
is a new tempo.
Is a new tempo based on a pop song, right? But the pop song is only the training track, so the training track sounds hilarious. Just 2 bars of each piece spliced into it.
Awesome.
And that's just to simply get to know the tempos.
Oh, I get it. So you use the Spice Girls tune to time your gestures and get the right tempo.
Exactly. So then eventually in your head, you're just singing this in your head, but the audience is not hearing that, and it's not in your ear either.
I knew that about that piece, but I didn't realize he gave you the actual measures of the.
It's hilarious.
The songs.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Yeah. I had to interject that. It was the perfect opportunity.
My favorite thing along the lines Ben's talking about, one of my favorite things to do, a clinic I give is about form and meaning and analysis. I mean, it's really about this thing I've been going around calling interpretive analysis, and I use the Terry DeMay piece and Ligeti Symphonic Poem for 100 Metronomes, and the most detailed one I go into is this little Brahms piano piece, and without even naming a single Roman numeral chord, I do this analysis that I'm really proud of, an interpretation of what's going on and how it works, and it's basically just rhythm, contour of melody, and that's really it. It's rhythm and contour and 2 themes that you just have to recognize as themes, and you don't have to name a single chord. And I love doing that to music majors because it makes the point of what Ben just said. Like, okay, so you can go through and name a bunch of chords. You just kind of labeled what it is, but not why any of it is there or what any of it means. And by definition, that's not an analysis. Like, if a scientist did that, they would say, well, I have this, that, and that, and that, and be done. Yeah. That's not what analysis is.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like we need to teach people to interpret intelligently more, and we don't. We just seem to tell them, okay, name all the ingredients, and you've done it. You're done.
As a quick aside, one thing that was awesome is Zach Browning gave this little sort of mini lecture. We played his piece, and then we played Palta by Bob Becker with Michael D'Angelo on drum set. And Mike was sitting there while Zach gave his lecture, and then when Mike got up, he started playing in the middle of his piece. He goes, do-do, do-dum, 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 bum, bum. It was a fill from In the Air Tonight in the Bob Becker piece.
That's funny.
Hey, well, we have just two more Facebook questions for Keith. One is, what artists and teachers had the biggest influence on you, and how have you incorporated what you've learned into your own playing?
And teaching.
It's a big question. As far as teachers, I have to say that my studies with Ed Soph, the great Ed Soph, had the biggest impact on me. I had great teachers, Chet Hedgecott, Mike Combs, University of Tennessee, and I studied a little bit with Alan Dawson. But the teacher that really turned me around as a player, as a musician, as a teacher as well, was Ed Soph. And a lot of it had to do with not only his methods, but just the way that he laid things out. I've always been pretty good at analysis and looking at what a situation required and figuring out how to do it, but Ed gave me a lot of tools with thinking about process, and maybe even more so allowing yourself the time to learn it. You know, I remember the first time I ever played for Ed was at a clinic, Jamie Eversole clinic, and I was really nervous. And I've been playing, I was young, but I've been playing with a lot of older professionals, and they were always telling me things. But I went to him and I played for him, and he said, well, why are you here? What do you want? And without going through a lot of stuff, basically I said, I want to work on this, and I think I'm weak at this. And he said, well, how could you expect to be good at it when your coordination is so out of sorts? And that statement in itself sort of was revealing in that I always thought that playing music was, you learn how to play the music. I never thought so much about the detail of mechanics and the detail of process. And so as soon as he said that, a light bulb goes off in my head and says, I can learn coordination, I can learn process, I can take the time to do it. And next thing I know, I'm working with him, and he was very clear. But it was never just about mechanics and never just about details without it having some musical means to an end. And that's the other thing about Jerry. I thought about Ed, but I also think about Jerry Coker as well, was the other component. They were both in my life as teachers at the same time. Jerry Coker, the great jazz educator here at University of Tennessee, and with Ed. Ed wasn't teaching in Knoxville. I was going to school in Knoxville, and I was driving to New Haven, Connecticut for my drum lessons, which is a pretty good little ride.
Yeah, that's a hike.
Yes.
But it was worth it. So the answer to my favorite player, my favorite teacher, Ed was a favorite player. I went to Ed because I'd heard him play with Woody Herman on a record. But other players, and very important, of course, would be, probably my favorite would be Elvin Jones. It sounds cliche to say it, but there's something about his playing which really sort of kind of excites me. I don't think I try and play like him, nor could I, or nor should I. But between he and Rory Haynes, two people that I listen to a lot and still do.
Yeah, great, great. Ted Jackson asks, one more question. What is the most important thing you teach your students?
I hope how to practice well, and how to think for themselves, and how to assimilate the situation and find ways of working on what was either not successful, or how to get better at things that you do that was successful. And if they can learn how to practice, I really do think that's the biggest part of our jobs, is helping students figure out how to get the most out of the time that they spend practicing.
Yeah, sure. Man, well, Keith Brown, thanks so much for joining us. Laurel talks about you all the time. She'll often say, well, my teacher once told me once, and I know, okay, she's either talking about Nancy Zeltzman or Keith Brown. I'm trying to guess which one. When she says it.
Category. It was wonderful to work with Laura. I mean, she is the same age as my daughter. So I sort of, a little at a time, saw her grow up as I was to take my children to her father's, my pediatrician, I'd always ask about her. And she started high school, and I knew about her in high school. They were schools together, so I feel like I saw her grow up kind of the same way I saw my daughter, just not as often, but having her at UT was a delight. And I have a lot of Laurel stories too. I tell some stories about her as well.
Aww.
Well, we got let's.
And then I'm sorry, I just recommended you for a teacher to somebody who's maybe going to call you soon. So.
Oh, cool! Thank you.
You'll be surprised too.
Cool. Hey, well, everyone, thanks so much. Let's see, this was episode 41 already, so we're coming up on 50. We'll have to do something crazy, like wear funny hats or something.
Been there, done that.
Oh, that's right. We've done that already. Okay.
Have
hey,
we?
guys,
thank you very much.
So much. Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome, Keith. Thanks so much for joining us. Catch you guys next time.
Bye.